Welcome back, adventurers. Do you think you know all of the rules of Dungeons & Dragons? Today we're going to talk about 11 rules that a lot of DMs just plain get wrong. First of all, let's talk about dark vision. So put simply, dark vision allows you to see in the dark as if it is dim light, and under dim light in the player's handbook it states that dim light is lightly obscured, and lightly obscured still gives you disadvantage on ability checks to see things in the dark. So yes, dark vision allows you to see in the dark, but you still have disadvantage, sorry. Next up is natural 20s. Now, natural 20s, for some reason, a lot of dungeon masters play this as an instant success. However, according to the rules, even if you roll a natural 20, you are still required to add your corresponding ability checks, which means that rolling a natural 20 is not an instant success. The only time that this is not the case, however, is in combat. If you roll a natural 20 in combat, it is an instant success and is considered a critical hit. And really, if you think about it, natural 20s are kind of annoying if you play them like instant successes, because that means that no matter how bad you are at something, there's a 5% chance that you're going to succeed at it anyways, and I think that personally that takes away from the game. And I also think it just takes away from a lot of the skills that your players are supposed to be experts in. For example, the barbarian may not be very dexterous and has never touched a lockpicking set in their life, but if they decide they want to try and lockpick something and they roll a natural 20, well, guess what? They suddenly just succeeded, even though they've never done that ever in their life, and that just really doesn't make any sense to me. Now, next up, we're talking about something that has come up in a lot of my own personal games, and that's surprise. Now, according to the rules in 5e, even if enemies are surprised, players and creatures are still required to roll initiative to establish the order of actions during combat. I think that where a lot of the confusion comes in is that players believe that once they've surprised the enemy, they can do whatever they want, and unfortunately that's just not true. Enemies get to roll initiative, and this is for one simple reason. When it comes to the enemy's turn, if they are surprised, they lose their actions, but what they don't lose is their reactions. The moment that their turn is done, they get their reaction back. So if that player is a mage, they can do things like shield or featherfall. And that's very important when it comes to their turns, because that means that they can still do things even though they didn't get their action. So remember that the next time your players surprise your creatures, because depending on the order of initiative, things can turn out very differently. Now, another thing that comes up often is stealth, and I think part of it is because most of the game is done in the theater of the mind, but succeeding on a stealth check does not grant indefinite invisibility. Creatures can still be detected even if they rolled really high on their stealth roll. Remember, the person that you're hiding from still has eyes, so it doesn't matter if you're hiding in a shadowy corner of the back of the room. If you're in a room that is being lit by the sun, chances are they're gonna see you. Rolling high in stealth does not mean that suddenly you are invisible to everyone. I'm sorry, it's just not the way it works. Now, another rule that players and dungeon masters alike both forget quite often is that when players rest, they only get back half of their hit dice. So for example, if you're level 8, you get 8 hit dice of whatever type of die that it is that your character is assigned, but when you long rest, it doesn't matter how many hit dice you spent. If you spent all 8 or if you only spent 1, you only get back half of your hit dice. So if you're a level 8 character, you only get back 4 every time you long rest. So remember to use them wisely, because they are a valuable resource. Now, something else that comes up often in my games is opportunity attacks. Now, an opportunity attacks happens when one creature leaves the effective combat range of another creature. Now, where players like to bend the rules a little bit or forget the rules is that this is only triggered when you yourself or that creature leaves the other's space. That means that if you push them or if you have a triggering effect that pushes them away, that does not trigger an opportunity attack because they were involuntarily pushed out of that creature's space. The opportunity attack is only triggered when they themselves move out of the other creature's range. Next up is long rests. And yes, long rests are on this list because so many dungeon masters forget that your players can't sleep in armor. So when they are long resting, they have to take the time to remove their armor, get comfortable, and do absolutely nothing but rest for 6 to 8 hours. That means that if your players are attacked in the middle of the night, guess what? You're not wearing armor. So remember that the next time you have an encounter that happens in the middle of the night, or if your players decide to use some of the buffs that come from their armor when they are resting. Now, next up are perception checks, and I've seen dungeon masters do perception checks in a lot of different ways, but the way that it works according to the rules as written is that if your players walk into a room and there is a secret staircase behind one of the bookcases, without making an investigation check, players are not going to become aware of that bookcase being a secret staircase unless their passive perception is higher than the DC that is required to notice it. And what I've seen a lot of dungeon masters do is simply let players make a perception check even though they didn't ask to make one or haven't made the proper investigation checks, and that really just takes away from passive perception as a rule altogether, and if that's how you want to do it at your table, then just remove that altogether. But if you're going to have passive perception as a rule, then you really need to make sure that it's being used correctly, otherwise you're taking away from characters who've brought their wisdom up for that purpose. Now, next up is readying an action. Now, in order to ready an action or hold your action, you have to do two things. First, you need to specify what the trigger is going to be, and second, you need to specify what it is that you're going to do. And the reason this is important is that this uses your reaction. So if you state a trigger and it comes back to your turn and that trigger hasn't happened, you've lost your action for that turn. This also applies to spellcasters. If you are holding a spell, let's say you decide, I'm going to cast Fireball the moment a goblin walks in. You cast the spell. You are holding Fireball and holding it in your hand, if you will, until the moment that goblin comes into the room. Now, let's say the goblin never comes into the room. Well, guess what? You just expended that spell slot and it never got cast. Now, to sort of piggyback that, holding an action also only means that you get a single attack. For example, if you are a fighter and you get 3 attacks, well, because you decided to hold your action, you only get a single attack. Now, why is that? Because the extra attack feature that you get states specifically that when you take the attack action on your turn, you get an extra attack. But when you decide to hold your action, you are reacting on someone else's turn, which means you don't get that extra attack option and you only get the single attack. And lastly, let's be honest, there are some things that you can do in Dungeons & Dragons that just break the laws of physics completely. But that does not mean that everything is possible, especially depending on what type of character you're playing. For example, a barbarian with an intelligence of 8 should not be able to do quantum physics no matter how high they roll on the dice. So if you roll really high on the dice, that does not mean immediate success, and so many times I see a dungeon master looking at a high number on a dice and suddenly that means that the player gets to do whatever they want to, and that's just not how it works. If it's not within the cards for your character to be able to do something feasibly, then no matter how high you roll, no matter how hard that player tries, they are just simply never going to be able to do it. But that's just my hot take on rolling high. Me personally, at my table, I don't think that rolling high immediately means success. If that's how you want to play it at your table, I think it adds an extremely fun and chaotic element to any game. It's just not how I would run mine. So there you have it. There's 11 rules that I think dungeon masters and players alike just forget a little too often. If you think I forgot something, please leave it in the comments down below. If you think I got something wrong, please leave it in the comments down below. And as always, forge on, my friends, and we'll see you next time, adventurers.